Hey guys, my name is Amr Gabr from 404 Football, and today I'm going to be talking about some wide receivers that we should be targeting in our fantasy football drafts. Wide receivers are one of my favorite positions to target in fantasy football because it gives you an extension of the passing game, and the passing game has become one of the biggest things essentially in fantasy football to getting points. Because the more targets you have, the more players you can target, the better it can become. So what I'm going to do today is talk about four wide receivers that I want to target in my underdog fantasy drafts. When we talk about fantasy football drafts. So my first wide receiver that I want to talk about essentially that I want to talk about is CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb is one of my favorite wide receivers for the 2020 year because he's improved across the board in every statistical category since he entered the NFL. From his yards per route run, which is a measure of how efficient a wide receiver is every time he is targeted, to yards per target, which shows the depth the receiver is being targeted at. So in 2020, his statistical categories were yards per route run, 1.81. He had 109 targets. He had an 18% target share. He ran about 516 routes. His Whopper, which is one of my favorite statistical efficiency metrics for wide receivers, which shows how talented the receivers are around the player and how efficient they are with those targets that they get. He also had 4.2 yards after catch per reception, which is a very high mark essentially. And then in 2021, across the board, he improved. So in 2021, he had 2.06 yards per route run. He had a 21% target per route run target share. He had 120 targets, which is higher than what he had in 2020. And he increased also as well to 5.5 yards after catch per reception. And those are some of the things that makes CeeDee Lamb very exciting because we should be excited about CeeDee Lamb. He's going to be the alpha receiver and for the Dallas Cowboys for America's team. And to make things even better, he lost his main competition in targets, which is Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper was shipped off to the Cleveland Browns this year, so Lamb is officially the number one team for America's team. And his underdog ADP right now is 13.9, and he's a sixth wide receiver overall being drafted. And I think personally that's an easy smash. The Cowboys currently have the 11th most targets available after Amari Cooper has left. But we should also remind ourselves that Michael Gallup, he's currently the team's wide receiver too, but he's also questionable to start the season as he tore his ACL last year. So we don't know when he's going to be starting. We don't know when he's going to be getting ready. We don't know the ramp-up period. I mean, the Cowboys did add James Washington and Jalen Tolbert, which was a third-round pick. But that won't be main target competition for CeeDee Lamb because CeeDee Lamb should be the alpha and he should be moving around the formation a lot like they did last year. The Cowboys currently also have the fourth highest win total at an over-under of 10. And the Cowboys also increased their pass rate in the second half of the season from 55% to 56.7%, which is a 1% increase, but that's very large in the NFL, which was the third highest among all NFL teams, which could be a sign of things to come in 2022. Also, on the Most Accurate podcast with John Paulson and Matt Harmon did mention that Lamb cleared a 75% success rate versus man coverage and an 80% success rate versus zone. And those numbers both indicate that that's an elite receiver. And those numbers have indicated that those receivers go on to do big things. And CeeDee Lamb is also one of my favorite bets to lead the NFL in receiving yards this year at 14-1 on FanDuel. So one of my favorite receivers this year to target CeeDee Lamb, and those are a lot of the reasons why. Another wide receiver that I'm really big on this year is DJ Moore. I mean, if anyone's been following my fantasy advice, if anyone's been following me personally at all, they know how much I love DJ Moore. DJ Moore is one of my favorite wide receivers in the NFL, not only because I'm a Panthers fan, but also because he's a very good NFL player. And he's been hampered by QB play ever since he entered the league in 2018. To understand how bad DJ Moore had it, these are the QBs he's played with since he was drafted by the Panthers in 2018. Cam Newton, Kyle Allen, Will Grier, Teddy Bridgewater, PJ Walker, Sam Darnold, and now the Panthers just traded for Baker Mayfield this past offseason. But yet, despite all that, he's had 3 straight seasons of 1,200 or more scrimmage yards. He's sold the 5th most receiving yards, 4,313, before the age of 25. And the only players to do that, to have more receiving yards than DJ Moore had at 25 years old, are Randy Moss, Larry Fitzgerald, Mike Evans, and DeAndre Hopkins, essentially all perennial Hall of Famers. But the one area in which DJ Moore has lacked that he struggled in is its touchdown department. DJ Moore has yet to score more than 4 touchdowns in any season. He scored 4, 4, 4, and 2 since he entered the league in 2018. but he also hasn't seen more than 13 red zone targets, which probably is a big reason why he hasn't scored a lot. So if we can get more red zone targets from DJ Moore, from Baker Mayfield this season, the sky's the roof for DJ Moore. And during the first 8 weeks of the season, DJ Moore actually scored the 16th most PPR points among all wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs. That's including everyone. And while also having the fourth most targets, 93 in the first 10 weeks of the season. But it all went downhill once Matt Rule fired Joe Brady in the second half of the season. The Panthers had the third largest decrease in pass rate, going from passing the ball to 54.3% of the time to 38.3% of the time. Only two teams had a larger decrease in pass rate than the Panthers in all of 2021. As our own John Paulson from 4-4 notes, Baker Mayfield is probably the best quarterback Moore will have played with in his career. And he notes, Baker Mayfield showed up the passing game quite a bit. Sam Darnold and the company threw for 3,573 yards and 14 touchdowns last year. Mayfield's career averages equate to about 4,002 yards, which is a 12% increase, 26.1 touchdowns, which is an 86.2 increase. So, long story short, Moore should be in a big bounce back season in 2022. Another wide receiver that I absolutely love this player. I don't know why people are down on him. I understand Trey Lance is coming in. I understand that Jimmy Garoppolo's gone. I understand everything essentially. But my favorite thing about Deebo Samuel is how good he was before he became a wide back. Deebo Samuel's 2021 season was a tale of two halves. From weeks 1 to 10, he saw 84 targets, which was the 8th most. He saw 979 yards, second most. This is among all wide receivers. He had 31% target share, second most, and he also had the third most PPR points. But during the second half of the season, we saw a massive shift in how Deebo Samuel was utilized. As someone would call him, he became a wide back. He had more rush attempts than targets from weeks 11 to 18, but he still scored the 6th most PPR points during that time frame. So to give you a better idea, he had 48 rush attempts, and he had only 35 targets from weeks 11 to 18. But from weeks 1 to 10, he saw 84 targets. So imagine that massive shift, seeing 84 targets from weeks 1 to 10, but only seeing 35 in the last 8 weeks of the season. During that time frame in the second half of the season, he also owned 15% of the target share, which is very good. He had 19% of the rush attempts for the 49ers. Deebo Samuel's ADP of 19.3 and wide receiver 8 and underdog, I think is very fair. And he's one of my favorite targets in fantasy because of the versatility he commands week in and week out. Deebo Samuel also had the highest yards per reception in the entire NFL at 18.9. Second highest player, Jamar Chase at 18 yards per reception. And everyone's drafting Jamar Chase as a wide receiver 1 right now. And I understand it's because Joe Burrow's there. People feel like he's more established. Deebo Samuel has an injury run. But with the inevitable switch from Jimmy Garoppolo to Trey Lance, a lot of people, as I said, are questioning Deebo's role and how it's going to affect him. But in the 2 starts he had with Trey Lance in 2021, he had 15 targets, 153 yards, while also having 9 rush attempts. So that's almost 7.5 targets per game. And if we're looking at 7.5 targets per game for 17 games, we're looking at well over 120 targets. And last year he only had 119 targets, which should help Deebo Samuel gain a lot more yards, which helped Deebo Samuel essentially get more PPR points, which would help Deebo Samuel score more points. My last and final receiver that I'm really, really high on, and I love this player a lot. I mean, not because I live in Chicago, not because I'm from Chicago, but it's Darnell Mooney. And Mooney's a favorite target of mine because the Chicago Bears target tree should be fairly condensed. The only viable threats to Mooney's target share is going to be Cole Kmet, Brian Pringle, and Velus Jones. I mean, Velus Jones, he was a third-round pick out of Tennessee in 2021. He couldn't even clear 280 yards in college until his 6 years eligibility. Like, this man, we shouldn't even be scared of Velus Jones, even though he's a third-round pick. But Mooney, after earning 140 targets last year and 23.5% target per route run in 2021, Mooney will look to build on that for 2022. A big reason for optimism is that Allen Robinson, who is basically looking to get out of town, is now gone to the Los Angeles Rams. The Chicago Bears now have the 9th most targets available in the NFL, with 218 targets now up for grabs between the Bears' receiving room. Mooney ran 613 routes last year, which was good for the 19th most in the NFL, but he wasn't very efficient, only eclipsing 1.72 yards per route run. But his targets have improved in back-to-back years, going from 94 to 140 in 2021. If Mooney can even climb his targets to 150, which only 10 players had in 2021, he could be looking at a very solid season, especially with his low underdog ADP at 57.6 and wide receiver 28. He's sandwiched between Rashad Bateman and Juju Smith-Schuster. So every single player last year who saw 150 more targets finished as a top 15 wide receiver. From weeks 11 to 18 last year, he saw 93 targets. So from weeks 11 to 18, he saw 93 targets, which is good for almost 12 targets a game. To put that in reference, Cooper Kupp, who led the NFL last year with 193 targets, saw 11.29 targets per game. So if Darnell Mooney could keep up what he did last year, he would be seeing almost 0.8 targets more per game than Cooper Kupp did. Mooney also has the benefit of playing in a lot of negative game script in 2022. The Chicago Bears seem destined to be a sub-5 win team with a Vegas total of 5.5 wins right now. The Bears are only favored in 3 games out of their 17-game schedule. With a negative game script comes the opportunity to pass the ball a lot, which could bode well for Mooney and his fantasy outlook for 2022. As always, please like this video and subscribe to our 4-4 YouTube channel to find more great tidbits like this and more videos like this. Have a great fantasy season, and I can't wait to see you guys later.